Funding for this program made possible by a grant from the Riverside Brookfield High School Educational Foundation.
Welcome back, viewers, to Vietnamese Cooking. I'm Roger Jensen.
Hi, I'm Monique Tran.
And we're going to take you through this edition, which we call the Chicken Show. We're going to be covering several chicken stir fries. We'll be introducing our ingredients and trying to give you a better appreciation for what's involved and how to do it at home. Okay, the first thing we'd like to demonstrate is this is called fish sauce. And fish sauce is unique to the Thai and the Vietnamese cultures in terms of its appearance, its taste. It is to what table salt is for Europeans,
right,
or for, let's say, satays for Malays or Indonesians. So that will be one of the primary things we're introducing today.
Well, now, Rogers, you have two fish sauce here. What are your impressions in fish sauce, and why two kinds?
Okay. All right. Well, there are two fish sauces that I brought here today. One is Vietnamese and one is Thai. If one has the opportunity, they should purchase the Vietnamese fish sauce because it is a little bit more robust. It has a little bit more flavor than the Thai version. However, if you can find only one, by all means buy it because it's one of the real characteristics of Vietnamese or Thai cooking. Now, I do warn you, though, the first time you open this for a non-Vietnamese or non-Thai, it's a very overwhelming aroma, very pungent, and it's very difficult to deal with at first because you really think it's spoiled when you smell it.
Right.
But if you use it, you find it works brilliantly in terms of delivery of a certain context, certain flavor in the cooking.
For example, like the one we're going to do next is the chicken with lemongrass. We're going to be using fish sauce.
And so essentially with the fish sauce, it can be used in several different ways. It can be used directly as a dipping sauce. It can be used in the cooking of Vietnamese or Thai cooking, or it can be blended together. Okay.
Now, this one too, which is, I kind of know a little bit about it. Do you eat hot stuff too a lot?
Occasionally I have some hot sauce. I don't really enjoy it that much. I use it sparingly because I simply don't want to overwhelm the other flavors in it.
Right.
So we'll also be using chili. This is really chili paste today, right? Which is different than, let's say, a hot sauce. And we'll be using that in part of the let's say, crafting of the stir fries today. Okay. Would you like to speak about lemongrass?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Today, one of our dishes is called chicken with lemongrass. And what I have here is a whole stem lemongrass. This is how it's grown. It goes straight up the stalk, and I'm going to show you now how to cut this and clean this. All this part down here is the root, so we want to, take all that off and take the outside skin as much off of the roots as possible. That, and then with the top part here, this is how they sells it, but you're not going to use this part. In some cooking, we use this for such as soup or just to get the taste in making a broth. But we're not using that, so I'm going to set that aside.
Now, do you peel the outer skin of it? It is much more difficult.
Actually, it's easy because the outer skin is thicker, and all you do is you just peel it off like that.
Now, where did you get the lemongrass at? Would you?
To get lemongrass, I would recommend all the Oriental store, the big Oriental store, and usually they already have some that already chopped up. So I would say, if you can go buy the fresh one and learn how to prepare it, then by any means do so because the flavor is very different than the one that's already chopped and put in a
the
jars.
Dried one.
Right, exactly.
The dry one. If you're forced to use the dry one, what you can do is you can add it to warm water and let it soak for about a half hour before using it. It has some of the initial aroma. The problem is a lot of the aromatics are lost simply through the process of drying it, as they are with all spices. Now, you can also obtain lemongrass in a place like Whole Foods, which is up on Lake Street in the border of River Forest and Oak Park, right across from the original Oak Park Mall. So you can't obtain it without going to an Oriental store. One of the things we'd like to really encourage you to do is to try to get to an Oriental store sometime in order to pick up some of the ingredients, because you simply will not find fish sauce. Earlier today I was at Riverside Foods. They had quite a variety of different sauces. Unfortunately, no fish sauce. So that's one of the things that if you're really going to enjoy the essence of Vietnamese cooking, you have to find a way to find a local Oriental grocer to go in and ask for either Thai or Vietnamese fish sauce. So there's an opportunity to get that. Now you're actually cutting it very fine. I can smell a great deal of, let's say, lemony, citrusy type flavor coming off of it right now.
Yeah. What I did is I finally cut it, because in this way when I mince it, it takes quicker. I mean, it's a lot quicker.
It's quicker not for you cutting it, but for cooking it, right? And that's what you're referring to?
Yeah. And usually some people, they just chop this in chunks like this and add it right into the soup, but they'll take it out later.
Now, you wouldn't eat this because it has a very, it's not like onion where if you cook it long enough it becomes very soft. It actually retains a lot of the, let's say, veinous or chewy context to it, so it becomes very difficult to use it. So if you're going to use it in the fashion of actually serving it as part of the meal, you have to spend the time, as you do in many Oriental meals, by cutting it very finely so it can stir fry quickly.
Exactly. And usually when you cut it finely, you can see that when it blends right in the meat, you say, oh my goodness, I'm eating lemongrass here. I'm not eating no chickens. But the whole point of this is we are just trying to get the flavor so that the chickens taste a little bit like, more toward the lemongrass. That's why the name of it is lemongrass. Okay, now you're referring to the chicken that you had.
Can you tell us what is in there? It looks like there's some sort of, I'll call it a marinade for lack of a better term.
Right. Well, exactly. It's not like a marinade. It's I added molasses in here due to the fact that I wanted to get the chicken to cook and have a brown color instead of white chicken color like you see in stir frying or a boiled chicken. So, but it doesn't affect the outcome of it because it doesn't add any sweetness to it because it's molasses. It just makes the chicken turn brown and give it a nice color.
All right, so really what you're doing is you're adding it to provide some contrast, and you're not going to have a problem with any sweetness or anything in there. Okay.
Okay. Well, right now I'm going to show you how to make chicken with lemongrass.
All right. Okay, what we have is we have the ingredients for two different stir fries here. We'll also be approaching a chicken with green beans, and we'll show you a special way to cut the green beans that allows you to use the stir fry faster and more effectively, because the key to any stir fry is to make sure that everything cooks about the same time, because there's a tendency to overcook certain things, and especially for instance beans normally in a Chinese stir fry you may parboil them or something in order to get them almost there. This I've never seen before, but we'll cover that in a little while. Okay. All right.
What I'm going to do is I'm just going to let this skillets get hot a little bit.
So you first warm the pan up before you put the oil in?
Oh yeah, exactly. So because usually in Vietnamese cooking, we always saute a little bit of garlic before we stir fry anything or even making any soup, because that it just kind of makes any other flavors that's unusual to the one that we're trying to make, kind of fade away a little bit, and just to bring out the flavor that we want.
Okay, so it really becomes a base almost. You have, you have a garlic flavor. Now, quite frequently in Chinese stir frying, you would also add ginger, for instance, grated ginger at this point. But we're not doing that here. We're just using garlic.
Oh, since you mentioned gingers, I can also add that to the chicken and lemongrass, because for Vietnamese cooking, the ginger and the lemongrass goes together.
Do they? I mean, frequently would you add that right in here?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I can add it at the end.
Oh, you could?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Why would you add it at the end?
Well, it just sort of, in a way, it added a nice touch.
All right.
And in another way, it just kind of blends with the chicken and brings out a little bit of spice, but it's not. So it doesn't mean it's hot or anything. It just,
All right. The hotness of the ginger goes away. But if you add it too early, what happens is you essentially would cook all the ginger, let's say, taste out of it. and you would lose it. By adding at the end, you can retain some of it, and you get a little bit of the ginger.
Right.
Ginger is very popular in Vietnamese, Thai, and Chinese cooking. All right, so right now you're coating the bottom of the pan, but it's going to be quite hot. So the idea is that the stir fry can effectively go. Now, when I do this at home, I have a tendency to cook it a little lower because I can't stand on top of it and watch it the whole time. So I because I also have to do other things while I'm making the meal. Now, what's missing right now is just the fact that we would also be making rice simultaneously. All right, and the idea behind the rice is you'll also serve the rice with the chicken. Okay. Well, we do know it's hot enough at this point, don't we? So right now what you're doing is you're quickly putting
I quickly add the chickens in.
All right, so the chicken's in there at this point, and you're going to start the stir-fry process. Okay. All right. Okay. All right, so the garlic we use effectively was the just store-bought garlic that's already been pre-minced. Typically, that's about a half a teaspoon per clove, a much more effective way than using a garlic press. Right. At this point, you're just cooking the chicken in order to prepare for the next step. It's quite hot because the bottom of the pan is starting to see some effect from it already.
And for this one, you don't want it you want it almost done, but not quite completely done because you're still adding some more ingredients to it.
All right. I mean, because really the lemongrass is imparting some flavor, but we don't put it in initially, right? Because we cook almost all of it away very rapidly.
As you can see, you know, the molasses just add a little nice brown touch of colors. It doesn't do anything to make the chicken sweeter or...
Okay. That was one of our concerns before the show started, was that we were worried that perhaps molasses itself may impart too much taste to it, but that doesn't really appear to be a problem. Because it's really much more passive than that.
Yeah, and then in Vietnamese cooking, we usually use sugar and salt.
All right.
You know, but in Chinese you hear about monosodium glutamate and all that, MSG. And usually we don't.
Yeah, that's kind of curious because in a lot of recipes, you see sugar and salt in Vietnamese where you don't see it, let's say, in Chinese. Or just some recipes with Thai, but you're really using essentially the sugar, the salt, and probably the nuoc mam or fish sauce is often added directly to this and imparts some flavor to it. Okay, so right now all we've done is we have the chicken cooked. We would go to the lemongrass.
Actually, like I would add that a little bit toward almost the done cooking process.
All right.
Then just now. Because I still have to add the fish sauce to this.
All right.
So we'll just let it cook and then we'll add some fish sauce.
Yes. Okay. All right. Are you going to measure that or?
Yeah, you put about a half a cup. That sounds like a lot, but it is salty.
Yeah. Frankly, if you overuse fish sauce, it does have a very salty taste to it, and it doesn't. I would say
because when they make the fish sauce originally, they use a lot of salt.
Right.
Right.
And salt is the fish sauce is essentially a combination of anchovies, which are, let's say, fermented for about a 2-month period, and what they'll do then is they'll add salt to it and they'll age it in oak barrels, and it tastes different from different parts of Vietnam. So what happens is there's different grades essentially. There's a first pressing, a second pressing, and a third pressing. We're using the first pressing here, and commonly you can use the second or third grade. It's very inexpensive. This whole bottle was about $2.80, so it's not something that you have to be concerned about wasting it. It's actually very economical, and it gives a real taste. It imparts the real essence of Vietnamese cooking, I believe, and that's one of the keys here.
As you can see, the chicken's almost done. Okay. If Roger can stir it for me a little bit.
All right, we'll do that.
Okay, I'll get it ready, set up.
So the first time I ever stir-fried was very scary for me. I'd never done that, but it's actually very simple. It's a very easy way to cook. Traditionally, it's done in a wok, which I think provides a little bit more uniform heat, even though we're using a copper pot here. Okay. And it seems to have a lot more ability to be adaptable. Now you're adding the lemongrass, so you're just going to spread it around.
Right. It depends on your likeness. I mean, if you like a lot of flavor, then, you know, usually people add a lot just because they like the taste of it, and sometimes maybe munch on one,
All right.
you know, once in a
Well,
while.
I think that someone who's never used it, how much of one of those stalks should they try the first time? Should they use about a half a stalk?
That whole stalk, I would say,
would
because
say?
you already chopped the leaves off, so
All right.
therefore you only leave like about 3/4 of it.
Okay, so effectively what happens is you wouldn't be disturbed if someone used the whole stalk there initially. You don't, it's not something that adds a lot of bite to it in the sense that it would ruin the taste of the meal.
Right.
You can experiment with that. Okay.
See, it's almost done.
right.
We're just gonna let it cook for a little bit.
All right. What we're going to do is we're going to actually go through and we're going to show you in the next recipe before we get there is we're going to look at the ability to go ahead and how do you cook the green beans fast enough so that they cook at about the same speed as the follow-on recipe, which is just chicken stir-fried again and green beans. If we look at it, what we're doing is we're cutting them almost diagonally across, but what we're doing is I'll say that it's just cut straight down the middle, trying to expose the seeds on the side. What we're trying to do here is we're trying to cut it in half lengthwise and expose the seeds in the middle. And the idea behind that is that it's not only for speed of cooking, but also for presentation. One of the beautiful things about Vietnamese cooking is its ability to present, let's say, beautiful looking dishes that are appetizing and really gain your interest in terms of wanting to eat them. So if we look at those are, one's much better cut than the prior one, but the idea is to cut them with the seeds exposed on both sides. And then what happens are the bean itself. And what we'll do is then we'll return those to the bowl, and the fact that they're cut in that fashion allows them to be cooked a lot faster. Otherwise, you have a problem in stir frying, and that essentially is that if you do not have them cook about the same time, you can overcook the meat, or you can
Right.
overcook some of the vegetables in combination. So we're trying to
Exactly.
cut the time down.
Okay.
All right, now at this point, you would like to,
At this point, I'm gonna serve the chicken.
all right. So this will be in terms of the
Yeah,
presentation?
right.
Okay, let's do this. All right. Now, there's a very noticeable smell or flavor imparted by the lemongrass at this point that you wouldn't normally detect.
Right.
That's something you'll have to try for yourself at home and find out if it really works or not.
Yeah,
But,
it depends. It varies on, people.
Now, I would think that if you were using the dried lemongrass, at this point, it wouldn't be as noticeable.
Right, exactly. Anything fresh is always better.
Right, and especially in the case of some of these ingredients here, the lemongrass is going to be kind of hard to find unless you do go to an Oriental grocery.
Right.
But the thing is, I still recommend that you try to do something with the lemongrass in order, even the dried, in order to get some feel for it. Okay. What we'll do at this point is I'll start to work on the stir frying of the second recipe, which we think is easier to understand, which is really the green beans with the chicken. And that should present a less difficulty.
Yeah, and then in every stir frying the Vietnamese have done is that they always add a little bit of oil, start with the garlic, fry it up a little bit, and then pour in the meat, any kind of meat first. And then kind of cooked it a little, and then make sure that it's almost done, but not, not done, because you don't want it tough, right? And then you add the vegetables so that everything's balanced out.
All right, so obviously the vegetables take the least amount of time.
Right.
Now, you might want to explain to everyone at home what you just put on there, because that's not, what is that?
This is lemongrass. I use it as a garnish, so that in a way, I mean, it's kind of nicer. It's also present what the dish is about. What is the dish,
Okay.
It's kind of foreshadowing a little bit. And so that's all it is.
All right. So, I mean, the other thing, the fact of the matter is people don't eat that. They still wouldn't eat that lemongrass, though, right? That's not the part you eat, because it's quite chewy.
Right.
But the presentation is beautiful. And what would you do with the Nook Mom at this point, the dipping sauce next to it?
The Nook Mom is preparing for the green beans.
All right.
Because usually green beans, when you cook them, they're not salty enough, or they're not, to the flavor, to the points where people don't need to add any salt.
All right.
And they would dip it, or if they do, they dip it in the fish sauce.
Okay. So really, even though we showed them what the Nook Mom was, it's not intended for that recipe. But you
Right.
could use it. You could try it and see if you enjoy the text and the
Right.
context of it. It'll be playing against the lemongrass though at this point,
Exactly.
right? So we have to deal with that. Okay. What we're doing is once again. The other thing about Vietnamese cooking, there's a tendency to use less oil. I may have used too much here, now I think about it.
That's fine.
All right, but Vietnamese themselves use less oil in their cooking than, let's say, equivalent some of the Chinese recipes, or if we got down and looked at some of the pork-based recipes further south. All right, this is kind of aggressive now. It'll boil off in a minute.
Okay.
Okay.
And yeah,
Okay.
just gonna take a little.
All right.
Now, the chicken in this, I cut it thinner than
All right.
it was in the lemongrass. I'm sure Roger went over that with you.
Okay. Well, I have a question though. Why would you? We're essentially doing what I'd say is a very similar recipe. Why would we be using thinner? Why would you cut this thinner?
So that it cooks faster, because green beans also cook faster, and you want to balance that out again. You know, it's all a matter of balancing things out. You don't want something overcooked or something not yet cooked.
All right.
You don't want that. So therefore, when it's thinner, you know, it's got cooked faster, and then
Right.
therefore, you know, people when they're hungry, they want to eat fast. You know, so therefore, foods get cooked faster.
Well, you know, but it always appears that stir frying takes only a few minutes. What people miss is all the prep work that goes in. You had to cut all that to the size that it is offline, and all the green beans were cut earlier. So most of the preparation for stir frying is done not here in front of the camera.
Right.
Right. Now, how earlier? Let's say I wanted to do this for dinner. Could I cut these up the night before and put them in the refrigerator?
Oh, you can do that. Otherwise, your green beans, you doesn't have to cut it diagonally like Roger's showing you. You can just chop it in half, about bite size,
All right.
and then have your chicken cut crosswise sections from the how you see a chicken breast is like line up long
All right.
way.
Okay.
You just cut it, and there you go. And then you just leave it in the refrigerator, and then the next day you have it.
So effectively what you could do though is you could set up all your ingredients ahead of time, put them in the refrigerator, then come home that night after work or whatever, and then just go through, fire up the, let's say the wok or the grill, or you know, however you're going to do it, and go
Right.
through the process of stir frying at that point. Because this part actually goes fairly fast. The part that's missing here is all the work that goes in front
Right.
of it.
Well, right now I'm gonna add the green beans.
All right.
With stir frying, you add the vegetable and then add the spice. Like it's different from if you cook the chicken or any kind of meat product alone, then you would add the spice first.
Okay, can you say that again?
Okay, when you're doing stir fries,
All right.
usually the spices get add up after everything else is added in it.
All right.
For example, like vegetable, meat, anything.
Okay.
And that would be later because you want the vegetable to have a flavor also.
All right. Okay, so essentially, are we adding any more ingredients to this?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Like I say, every basic stir fry in Vietnamese is you add a little bit of sugar
All
and
right.
a bit of salt. But
Okay.
usually the basic or the thing that you should keep in mind is that sugar is always more than salt.
All right.
For example, if I put like 3/4 or a tablespoon of sugar, or you know, and I would add like about half tablespoon of salt.
Okay, but that also has some effect of it because if we're going to put Nook Mom in it, you get some
Well,
salt. Or
usually it depends. If Nook Moms go in some stir frying, like there are certain vegetable that you usually use Nook Mom instead of salt.
All right.
So, but this one stir fry, we don't use Nook Mom for this. The salt would do it because usually, you know, otherwise it would be too much in the salt.
But we are going to have a dipping sauce with Nook
Right.
Mom that has it imparts a bit of a salty taste to it, so you
Right.
don't want to overwhelm it
Exactly.
by adding equal amounts of salt and sugar to it, though. So
Right.
if anything, one should ease up on adding salt to the recipes if you have a dipping sauce with it. Right? The sugar is characteristic of almost every Vietnamese meal, it seems
Exactly,
like. You know,
right.
and it doesn't seem, I think it has something to do with, well, at least I'll claim it has to do with the fact of the French heritage. Do you want to agree with that or disagree?
Oh yeah, yeah, I definitely.
Because there's certain things about Vietnamese cooking that actually reflect some French influence, which is unusual compared to the rest of the Asian cooking, you know, like desserts and things like that. So I offer that tribute to them.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So actually, this has a better contrast in colors when you compare it to the other one.
Right.
But it's very obvious now why you'd like to keep this color lighter on here, because it provides a very nice contrast.
Right.
Okay, let me go right over here.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Okay. I'll take care of that.
As you can see here, the chickens are completely, they're white compared to the other chicken. That's why, you know, usually when I do dishes like that, I added molasses just to brings out the taste and the color. Here you go.
Okay.
And that would serve with rice or...
Could you serve this one with noodles, for instance?
Well, it depends. And you would use the vermicelli noodles, and I would prefer you eat it with the lemongrass, the chicken lemongrass.
All right.
Because it's the noodles and the lemongrass kind of blended in together, so it makes it nicer.
Well, let's say I couldn't eat green beans. What would you recommend as a substitute in a very similar type recipe to this? I mean, is there others?
It's going to be very strange. You can use Brussels sprout or cabbage, because Brussels sprout, people don't think of them as, you know, cooking or stir frying. They used to pickled it. So you use cabbage or carrots, combinations of cabbage and carrots. So, and that way, you know, if you don't like green beans, because I know most people, you know, picky. They don't like green beans, but trust me, believe me, on this dish you would like green beans because it doesn't taste like the steamed green beans or the, you know, the one in the cans. This is fresh.
Okay, well, if you use carrots, for instance, would you do anything other than what we indicated here? Would you have to cook those separately initially, or?
Yeah, if I used carrots, I would actually cut it in the strips, nicely and thin.
All right.
And then I can cut it sideways like this, so I have like nice little strips. Again, when I cooked it, it get done faster.
All right.
There, and then the same thing with cabbage. You would cut it similar to this, but a little bit bigger because they're flat. You know, they're not round like a cabbage. I mean, like carrots, and so that's why it cooks faster. You can also substitute instead, you don't like chicken, use beef, whatever.
Okay, well, we don't want to jump ahead though. We're going to do a beef show later. What we'd like to do is concentrate on chicken. I had a very unusual one when I was in what we'll call the Chinatown part of Saigon. It's called Cholan. I was invited by some very close friends to go into a restaurant, and I will honestly say that there probably hadn't been someone like me there in quite a while, because there was the whole neighborhood turned out to sit down. And what we had was we had a chicken stir fry that effectively had carrots in there and had another ingredient that frankly I can't remember offhand because it was kind of unusual. But the idea is that the food was very delicious, very simple, and one can say very clearly that it's very healthy and good for you.
Right.
Now, they didn't do as much in presentation as you did, though. You know, there's just other things that can possibly be done. Now, can someone use a different sauce than this other than just straight Nook Mom? Can you use something else?
Yeah, for example, for the green beans and chicken, you can use soy sauce.
You can directly use soy sauce?
Yep.
All right. I mean, pour it right out of the can and use it?
Oh, yeah, pour it right out of the can and use it. You know, put it in one of those dipping sauces.
Okay. And so, in other words, traditionally, in a lot of, let's say, Chinese restaurants, they'll have serving bowls up there, which you can put in soy sauce into one, you could put Nook Mom into another, and then what you could do is put those on the table together. I wouldn't show anybody the can of soy sauce, of course, because they might be a little bit surprised by it. But the idea is that you can then have different flavors, and then the food can be enjoyed delicately and very nicely, because each part of it can impart a slightly different taste to it. So I think that is kind of the important thing, is to experiment with things that are easily obtainable and taste very good. Do you have any other recommendations? Other than rice, would you recommend any other vegetable, for instance, with this one?
Usually, a Vietnamese family would have either the stir fry or a soup.
All right.
And they use watercress, so that's going to be a little, more fancy, but there's nothing to soup either. It's very simple, but that's what they would use for, for a substitution if they want something a little more liquidy and.
Okay, and I think what we need to do is explore a soup in a later show, and
sure.
get a better feel for it, because that's really the breakfast food. I'll argue it's the breakfast food in Vietnam. It's not cereal, and it's not a lot of other things. There's several soups that are really important that catch the real flavor of Vietnam, and I think those we can cover in another show. I'd like to say thank you very much for tuning in to this episode. We hope you got something out of the chicken show, and I'm Roger Jensen.
I'm Monique Tran.
Right.
Thanks.
Thank you for watching.
Monique Tran is a 1997 graduate of Riverside Brookfield High School. She is the 1996 National FHA Hero Food Service Event Champion and the 1997 winner of the FHA Hero National Project Leaders at Work in Food Service. Roger Jensen is the director of the Asia Pacific region for Lucent Technologies. He is responsible for business management activities in the Asian market, where he developed an interest in cooking Oriental food. He resides in Riverside with his wife and 2 sons.